Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 156, Deja Q.
Welcome to another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ken Ray. Each week on Mission Log, we watch Star Trek. Then, we talk about Star Trek, trying to see just how much meaning was crammed between the prologue and the closing credits.
This week, we go round and round with an omnipotent being in Deja Q.
You know what we haven't done in a while?
What's that?
The alternate title game.
Ah, I missed that.
Yeah, you know, we actually did that, I think, on the first episode of this show and then just kind of quit. I think we've done it like maybe twice, but we should do it more. There were a few alternate titles for this week's episode. Mm-hmm. Will there ever be another Q? Spoiler alert, yes. There was talk of just making the title a lowercase q, which, you know, would have worked, but is probably a little too subtle. And then Q Me Baby was actually one, which would have been a great tie-in to a 1990 hit by Belle Biv DeVoe, but otherwise made absolutely no sense whatsoever.
I love the alternate title game.
It's fun. It's fun. Yeah. And the cool thing about it is it's a game that anyone can play. In fact, if you've got an alternate title for an upcoming episode of Star Trek that we're going to be covering, you should send it to us, or some other stuff. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can. 323-522-5641. That number again, 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. Sorry. Don't call and sing us Cue Me Baby.
No.
Because I've already covered that before the recording.
Yeah.
I think before the recording.
It was before we recorded.
That's too bad, because that would have been a great extra. You know what else is a great extra every week? I don't know if you call it extra, but it is kind of. Mm-hmm. It's trivia.
Oh, here we go, Ken. For Deja Q, today's story is written by Richard Danis. Now, he wrote the teleplay for Booby Trap.
I'm not playing anymore.
Okay. He was one of the story editors for a good portion of season 3. And we do need to actually credit part of the plot line here to Gene Roddenberry. So the original idea had Q actually pretending to lose his powers, and it was Gene who said they needed to commit to the actual idea of somebody godlike losing his power for real. Now, the episode is directed by Les Landau. We remember Les. He was the second unit director, then stepped in to finish Code of Honor when Russ Mayberry was let go. Today's episode got 2 Emmy nominations, one for Best Editing and one for Best Special Effects. And Ken, you might recognize the uniforms on the Brielle scientists. They were the same ones used on the Promelians in that episode with the 1,000-year-old spaceship that was sitting out there. You know the one.
Oh, my goodness. Really?
Yeah.
Do I have to say it?
Yeah.
The Enterprise incident?
No.
Oh.
No.
The one with the... All right, Booby Trap. Fine. Booby Trap. There.
Okay.
I really wasn't gonna. I was fairly committed. You know, we had somebody write to us and say, so I tried a drinking game where every time you say Booby Trap,
then I'd
take a shot. Right. And the guy was like, yeah, I'm glad I quit that game.
Yeah.
So I was actually, after I heard that, I was fairly committed to not saying Booby Trap anymore.
Yeah. All right. Now let's talk about some guest stars here. Q makes a couple of beautiful women appear out of nowhere. One of them is played by Sandra Wilde, who did a lot of modeling for Playboy in the late 80s through the 90s. And like many other models from that time, she appeared on a bunch of TV shows, including the seemingly required spot on Married with Children. And I mention her because she'll actually be back for more Trek on Deep Space Nine. Now, the other actress is unknown, and it's worth pointing out here that there are a lot of unknown actors in Star Trek, particularly this early on, although 1990 doesn't seem that long ago. There was no IMDb at the time, so we're relying on the actors themselves in many cases to fill in the missing information. We'll see an example later on when even in a feature film, there is missing information that had to be cut because of a missing credit.
Wait a minute. relying on the actors themselves.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. So basically,
go back in and fill in.
Somebody who checks IMDb next week will find out that I was on an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation.
And you were great.
I was awesome. Are you kidding me? I just can't believe I wasn't credited until, next week when I figure out how to edit IMDb. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So speaking of missing credits, sometimes that is done on purpose when you have a big name star and you kind of don't want to give it away at the opening. So we expand our understanding of Q in this episode when we meet another from the Continuum, this one played by Corbin Burnson. He is definitely best known for playing Arnie Becker on L.A. Law, but please don't think that he disappeared when that show ended. He has worked a lot, just to name a couple: West Wing, Jag, Boston Legal, The Young and the Restless, even Tim and Eric Awesome Show. And John Delancey returns here as Q, of course, and he does go full Delancey, for real. They couldn't get the shot with classic Hollywood camouflage techniques. He was wearing a jockstrap, and it just didn't work, so he shot it in the buff. He was standing up, though, on a blue screen, and then they matted that into the shot. So in his own words, he says, quote, "Finally, I said to hell with it. People who want to stay, stay. People who want to go, go. I take the jockstrap off and let's shoot the damn thing." Did we ever mention the origin of the name Q? Gene Roddenberry named the character after English Star Trek fan Janet Quarton. She showed Delancey a letter from Gene with that promise.
It is like Encounter at Farpoint all over again, but not really. Still, Q is back, and Q is back. Let us hear what happens.
Prologue. Braille 4 is under threat. Its asteroidal moon is about to crash into it, and the Enterprise is trying to stop that. No one knows why the moon is suddenly out of whack, but it is, and the lives of a million are in jeopardy below. Set the countdown clock for 29 hours. Geordi LaForge has an idea. It basically involves pushing the moon with the ship's tractor beam, though he says the chances of that working are pretty slim. He tries anyway, and it doesn't work. They're pushing the moon, but not nearly enough to make a difference. Also, there's a high-pitched whine coming from nobody knows where. Geordi says engines are about to go into automatic shutdown. Picard orders the tractor beam turned off, and where is that infernal whine coming from? Suddenly, hanging in midair in front of Captain Picard is a naked Q. And we won't talk about what's hanging in front of naked Q. He falls to the floor as we head to opening credits. Act 1. Picard's pretty sure he knows now why the Braille 4 moon is falling from the sky. It had to be Q. It had to be Q. A more petulant than usual Q says he has no idea what Picard is talking about. He's got bigger problems than millions of beings about to be thrown into an ice age. He's no longer part of the Continuum. His powers have been revoked by his superiors. Punishment for spreading chaos across the universe. No one on the Enterprise believes him. So he was made human as a punishment? Not exactly. He could have been any mortal thing he chose, though he says he chose to be a human on the Enterprise because in all of the universe, Picard is the closest thing he has to a friend. Nobody really believes that either. He is seeming human, though. Data says he reads on sensors as fully human, and Counselor Troy says she's getting an emotion off of him. He's terrified. Picard's not buying any of it. He tells Q to put the Braille 4 moon back in its orbit. Q says, seriously, no powers. I'm human now. How can I prove that? Worf suggests dying would work, though Picard has a simpler plan. He tells Worf to throw Q in the brig. On the way, Q is bemoaning all the bad parts of being human. What he should have said was that he wanted to be Klingon. So, Worf, as one Klingon to another, will you talk to the captain for me? Worf doesn't seem inclined to. All right, well, think about this at least. If I was still omnipotent, would I let you lock me up? Whatever. In Picard's ready room, Picard and Riker are trying to work out why Q is jeopardizing the lives on Braille 4, and what game he's playing exactly. Picard finally admits the possibility that Q may have nothing to do with it, that he really can't snap his fingers and fix everything. Neither he nor Riker think that that is likely, but they have no choice but to behave as if it is the case anyway. Picard tells the Braille Science Station that their first attempt to move the moon has failed. 25 hours left before disaster. The planet has started moving its inhabitants to areas least likely to be affected by the impact, and the Enterprise will be trying again to move the moon. Just then, whoosh sound, bright light. The Enterprise is being probed. Unbeknownst to the Enterprise, the probe has found what it's looking for. It had to be Q. Act 2. Picard visits Q in the brig. He wants to know what the heck is going on and what was that probe all about. Q says he has no idea. For the first time ever, he was sleeping. Picard is bored again and starts to leave, but Q makes an appeal. No, he can't snap his fingers and fix everything, but that doesn't mean he can't help fix everything. He has literally countless years of experience with moons and the universe and everything. Can Picard really pass up his help? Resigned, Picard puts Data in charge of Q. First job, take Q to Geordi in engineering. Data and Q discuss whether Q really is human. Sadly, Q says, it is true. An irony, says Data. It means you have achieved in disgrace what I have always aspired to be. Q says humans offer nothing to envy, though Data says he doesn't feel envy. He feels nothing. He shares the human race's curiosity, but cannot share its emotions. Q says emotions aren't all they're cracked up to be. In engineering, Q hurts his back. Yet another new experience for him. Geordi calls Dr. Crusher. In the meantime, Q does have a solution to the Braille 4 moon issue. Simply change the gravitational constant of the universe. That's just so Q. How do you redefine gravity? Slap on your Nikes. Just do it. This is not all as useless as it sounds. First, Dr. Crusher's instruments show actual back trauma in Q. Yet another sign that he is, in fact, human. Meanwhile, Q's flip comment about changing the gravitational constant of the universe has Geordi thinking. No, he can't do that, but if they extend a warp field around the moon, that could change its mass and make it easier for the Enterprise to push. Now, Q is hungry. He and Data go to 10-4 to grab some food. Bad idea. That's where Guinan works. And they don't get along. She comes in to gloat over Q's newfound mortality. And to test it. By stabbing Q in the hand with a space fork. They really don't get along. Recounting his many misdeeds, Guinan suggests that Q get used to begging, since that's the only thing that's going to keep him alive. On the bridge, sensors pick up a plasma cloud, which turns out to be a living thing. An intelligent thing. Guinan identifies it as a calamarain, and it goes to work right away, torturing Q. Geordi is able to stop it by shifting the ship's shields. Q falls to the floor screaming for help as we go to break. Act 3. The Enterprise now has two problems. An alien force that wants to torture Q and a planet that's about to be mooned. Yeah, have a moon fall on it. Picard's a little annoyed. For all of Q's talk of friendship, he's really just here for protection. And Picard wants none of it. He'll dump Q at the nearest star base. Q says he could be a member of the crew, though, and Data does allow that he has been helpful in the Braille situation. Oh yeah, that. Picard calls to see how Geordi's doing. He's working on it. They'll try giving the moon a warp field enhanced push in 14 minutes. Picard tells Data and Q to go to engineering to assist. In engineering, Q tries to take command. Geordi shuts him down. He's meant to push some buttons every now and then. Q argues, but Geordi is in command. Get to the controls or get the hell out of here. After a bit of arguing and adjusting, the warp push starts to work. There is a problem, though. To pull the maneuver, the Enterprise had to lower its shields. When the calamarain realized that, they began to attack, again, trying to get at Q. Shields are raised, stopping the calamarain, but also stopping the moon maneuver. The calamarain overpower the shields and go back to torturing Q, electrifying him, paralyzing him. Geordi can't give shields more power. The Enterprise has been driven into the upper atmosphere of Braille 4, and they need all of their power to escape. Data grabs onto Q, and now he's electrified and paralyzed. Free of the planet's atmosphere, Geordi can once again strengthen shields. This breaks the calamarain's attack, dropping both Q and Data to the floor. Act 4. Data was seriously damaged by the calamarain attack. Geordi and Dr. Crusher will work on him. As for the moon, the warp push bought a bit of time, but that's it. They can try again at the moon's next perigee. But that will once again leave them open to attack by the calamarain. In Picard's ready room, Q stops by to discuss mortality with the captain. It's something he seriously never thought about before. He could have died, had it not been for the sacrifice made by Data. When he thinks about whether he'd have done the same for Data, and is forced to admit he would not have, he feels ashamed. As I learn more and more what it is to be human, I am more and more convinced that I would never make a good one. I don't have what it takes. Without my powers, I'm frightened of everything. I'm a coward. I'm miserable. And I can't go on this way. Now it's back to sickbay, where Q tells Data that his lack of feelings, his lack of emotions, his lack of pain, they're all covetous. But if it means anything to Data, Data is a better human than Q. From there, Q heads to the shuttle bay and steals a shuttle. He tells Picard that he just can't get used to following orders. The Calamarain start pursuing the shuttle, which Q says is a bonus. It's better this way. Please, don't try to save me. Picard says there's no nobility in this suicide, but Q says seriously, as a human, he'd have died of boredom. Act 5. Deus ex Deus. Picard calls for the transporter room to simply beam Q's shuttle back aboard the ship. Well, it's a perfectly good shuttle. Beaming it aboard won't work, though. Neither will extending the Enterprise shields around it. Neither will the tractor beam. Something is stopping the Enterprise from saving Q, though they have no idea what that something is. We do, though. There's another Q on the shuttle. This particular Q has been keeping track of the Q we know, despite having this particular Q having been the one to throw our Q out of the Continuum. He's impressed with these humans, but he's more impressed with our Q's selfless act of leaving the Enterprise and drawing away the Calamarain. Q argues that that's not what he was doing. He was simply looking for the quickest, easiest death he could find. Other Q doesn't buy it, and our Q finally admits that yes, it was sort of a selfless act. And with that, our Q's powers are restored, and he sets to torturing the Calamarain almost immediately, until other Q reminds him that he's still watching. After a musical number, seriously, Q lands a mariachi band on the bridge of the Enterprise. After a musical number, he puts the Braille 4 moon back in its orbit and teases the crew with promises of more misadventures to come. Q does have one other parting gift, though. As he disappears, Data bursts out in laughter. Repeatedly. When he finally comes to his senses, he says he doesn't know why it happened, but it was a wonderful feeling. The end.
Oh, I love it when the Q can get along again.
Can't Q just all get along? Yeah. All right. Let's get one thing out of the way right now.
Okay.
I love me some Arnie Becker.
Oh, sure.
I love Corbin Burnson.
Of course.
He could have drawn it back like just a tiny bit on this. I felt like he was doing an imitation of John Delancey, but a bad imitation of John Delancey.
Yeah, yeah.
And if all of the Q are like that,
then they're insufferable.
Well, then I don't understand how the universe ever made it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish he had played it a tiny bit differently. Again, this is me playing the part of the of every barista in LA saying how they would have directed something that came out 25 years ago. Nothing wrong with being a barista, by the way. I make fun of how some people direct. I also could not make a good cup of coffee at a Starbucks. No way.
Yeah.
Or a latte. I'm crap at making lattes. So hats off to directors who direct and baristas who barista.
And Corbin Burnson who Burnsons.
Yeah, he does do that. Did you mention, by the way, Psych?
No, I didn't.
He's the dad on Psych. Yeah. That's what I think of as his next big role. I don't know if that was his next big role, but that's what I think of as his next big role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still out there a lot, but L.A. Law was, he was obviously a huge, huge star when that came on. And it's interesting to get somebody that big to come in and do a role on a show that is also big at the time. And I imagine he showed up and he met John Delancey and is like, oh, okay, John Delancey plays the role like this. That's what the role is about. So I will play it like that,
I guess you would hope that somebody would have that some director would have been maybe not afraid of directing Corbin Burnson, though, because he's directing Patrick Stewart, for crying out loud, and John Delancey and Whoopi Goldberg. That's the amazing thing, too. You got huge, you forget, because now you would look at, now Corbin Burnson would be like a shoe-in for Star of the Week on a reboot of The Love Boat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But at the time, man, there was almost no bigger show, certainly on network TV, than L.A. Law, and everybody who was on it was huge. Although, actually, when did L.A. Law leave the air?
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We might be sort of jamming some of that stuff, and I want to say, is it really mid-90s?
Yeah, I think so.
Might be
maybe
late 80s, early 90s, but whatever. Yeah. Still a big star is the point. And, of course, again, absolutely amazing that Whoopi Goldberg, hugest star on the planet at the time, or one of the hugest stars on the planet, is also on Star Trek.
Sorry, I'm finishing a note here. Love Boat, reboot, Corbin, Burnison.
This would actually be a Love Boat reboot, don't forget, because there was the one where Robert Urich.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
Of course it counts. It was a reboot. It may have been a bad reboot, but it was a reboot.
But does it stick to canon, Ken? All right, so today's episode, let's talk about that. So interesting makeup on the Brielle scientists that we meet. I thought for a moment there, because of the way it worked, I thought that they had maybe shot them saying something else and then went back in and dubbed it just so you'd have a total mismatch of the lips moving. So it was, a creative use of the makeup. But
okay.
Yeah, it was, I'll leave it at creative and interesting.
Here was the question I had. Were those two scientists a couple? Or are we falling back to that TOS thing where if things are bad, you just start holding hands with people? Because they've been scientists all the way through, one male, one female, whatever. But then towards the end, the female of the scientists, or the female of the species, if I want to tell you in a song thing again, because I love doing that, Yeah. The female of the species is like, if this doesn't work, Picard, we're like all going to die. I mean, seriously, everybody's going to die. And the male scientist reaches over and puts his hand on her hand. He's like, thank you, Captain Picard. We know you're doing your best.
There's maybe like a little, Cornelius and Zira relationship there. Maybe.
All right, maybe so. Maybe so. It was just a weird thing. It was a weird thing to see happen because we haven't really seen that since Gary, what's his name on the bridge of the Enterprise?
Gary Mitchell.
Gary Mitchell. Oh, we're going to go to the edge of the galaxy. Quick, hold my hand.
Right. Yeah. We'll assume that they are a couple.
All right, good. Because that's important.
And we'll assume that they're putting a lot of pressure on Picard.
What the heck was up with that? Like he
didn't,
didn't know. Although in fairness, it really did feel like they did have to remind Picard, oh yeah, we're supposed to be working on getting the moon back in its orbit.
Hey, they just, the Enterprise just showed up. They didn't have to.
Yeah, I know.
Okay? If they had been someplace else, it would have been the end of the Brielle.
Yeah.
So, but they do have realistic concerns. They talk about like the nuclear winter and the tsunamis, and all this stuff was scientifically interesting. And I thought, okay, well maybe somebody at NASA is probably having a similar conversation. How do we move a celestial object out of the way if we eventually had to? You hear about that every now and then in the news. Like something will pop up and they'll say, oh, an asteroid that's like millions of miles away from the Earth, but if it did get nearby, what would we do about it?
Right. Right. Yeah. I forgive me for correcting you on one thing. Not nuclear winter, but the debris that's kicked up. It's the same sort of thing as nuclear winter, but nuclear not included.
Yeah, they're describing the effects of a nuclear winter, but it's from the dust kicked up by the impact of that small moon.
Yeah. What killed the dinosaurs? Maybe. Yeah. We don't know. I like Father Guido Sarducci's idea about that. That it was actually it was aliens that picked up all the dinosaurs except for two. And then the meteor hit.
Got it.
Yeah. So you know what? It's always fun on a Q episode. John Delancey. I know he doesn't get to ad lib. So I think writers just take liberties, right? Because you've got a character who comes on who's completely irreverent and who just says whatever's on his mind, and that pretty much just frees the writer to just be dumb. And sometimes it leads, or be dumb with the character, rather. I don't mean be stupid with the character. I mean just have fun. And sometimes that leads to great monologues. Sometimes that leads to great dialogue, like the stuff. I know you love the stuff that happened with Worf in this episode.
It's just eat any good books lately. It's so good.
Eat any good books lately was fantastic. I was also glad, by the way, there's a growing of the relationship between Q and the people on the Enterprise besides Picard. The only name he called Worf was Worf.
Yeah, he didn't call him Microbrain.
No, he didn't call him anything except for Worf. Well, again, he tried to butter him up by saying, I could be a Klingon. I should have been a Klingon. As one Klingon to another.
Oh, but he did call him a Romulan.
Well, he did call him a Romulan. I was just trying to get to him, though.
Yeah, that's a serious insult.
You're right. He did call him another name besides Worf. That's true.
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned the return of the space fork, because that was also a great moment. that was pretty golden.
Yeah. Yeah. We're gonna have to talk about Guinan later, though.
We will. One thing, did you notice the call out for Berthold radiation?
I did indeed.
Because remember, it is deadly unless you are huffing spores.
I know. If only there was some life-saving, life prolongation plant around that could help. I wonder if there's any planet out there where we could find one of those.
I was surprised. You have to do this for the way the story is written, but Q knows all these little details about humans, like bad breath and pimples, and they have to bathe, but he doesn't know about things like eating and sleeping. He's got a little learning to do. So let's see. I wondered at some point if they ever thought about just maybe helping to evacuate some of the Brielle.
Some of the Brielle?
Well, just as many as they could get. The Brielle have communication with a starship, which would lead me to believe that they have transportation of some sort.
Yeah.
And the Enterprise does have some transporters. And they have shuttles, and they got all these other things. It's like, hey, while we're working on solving this problem with the moon, we will also help you get away.
Well, no, they can't, though. I mean, here's the thing. This apparently happened really quickly, and they do actually put out the call in the beginning for get as many ships here as they can for the relief effort, right?
Yeah.
And no other ships show up the whole time that we're here. So we have to assume that this whole thing is happening, first of all, very fast, and second, that all the other ships are very far away. So
sure.
I can't remember which episode it was of the animated series, but I believe it was the one with Robert April, but I'm not 100% certain. But there was an episode of the animated series that had where a planet was going to die or be hit by something or be destroyed by something, and they were like, oh, we'll get the children off planet, but that's really the best we can do, and that whole thing just seemed needlessly awful and cruel. The Enterprise can hold like 1,000 people. I know we had to bring Lloydie that time, so how many did they have? Maybe 300?
Too many.
Well,
that's
to bring Lloydie, maybe.
For.
But, I mean, so maybe they could have gotten like 300 people off that planet, but at that point, you're just creating an arc.
Yeah.
Here was the question that I had, actually. Q didn't do this. Did other Q do this? I mean, was this whole thing actually a test set up for our Q by the other Q? Because the whole thing did come out of nowhere. I mean, and Q said, it's probably like something else. What did he say? It's like another celestial mass passing through this galactic plane, whatever, probably a black hole or something like that. Was it actually just other Q?
I kind of suspected it was.
All right. It doesn't matter, but it was just something I wondered about.
Yeah, but no, totally reasonable to believe that. Let's see. Now, I was surprised to hear Geordi, of all people, say about Q, he's not worth it. In discussing, helping and or saving Q. But of course, his friend Data was hurt, so I get it. He's sort of hurting from that. And I do have to say that I was really pleased to see, I've criticized Star Trek The Next Generation in the past for having trouble understanding concepts like a wild party. But I'm really glad to see that in the 24th century, nothing says a party quite like a mariachi band. And I'm glad that hasn't changed in a few hundred years.
Time now to look into the deeper meanings in Deja Q. Also, Ole.
We've covered a lot of episodes of Star Trek. This is number 156. And I kept thinking, for all the talk we've been giving to enlighten Star Trek, always extending the olive branch and treating enemies with respect and dignity, maybe I have to give them a pass this time on treating Q the way that they do. They have been burned too many times, and they really have no idea what they're dealing with. But it's kind of interesting that he shows up and they're just immediately like, you're horrible, throwing you in the brig.
Well, I mean, they don't immediately throw him in the brig, but that's only because they don't think they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, they wait 30 seconds.
They wait 30 seconds.
I love the fact that Worf was like, well, you could die. It's actually
that's a great line.
It is.
That is a great line.
It is a fantastic line, and also, and nobody was upset. Nobody turned to him and go, "Hey, that's not appropriate. He's our guest." They're all like, "Yeah, I hear you."
Yeah, but it did make me think back to the days of like the Corbin Light Maneuver, a show we've mentioned every now and then on Mission Log. To say, okay, well, how bad do things have to get then before Kirk's like, you know what, you gave us Tranya, but I still don't trust you, and that's off to the brig with you if you do one other thing, But in this case, I guess Q's different. Q has done nothing but torture them. Right.
Well, I mean, you extrapolating, Kirk actually did do that in Star Trek VI, right? He's never trusted the Klingons, and you can leave Star Trek V out of it because you kind of have to for Star Trek VI to work.
Sure, yeah.
He's never trusted the Klingons, and at the end of it, he sort of has to question himself on that. And at the end of it, he comes around. It was wonderful that Kirk immediately turned around to help Baylock. Yeah, that was just an absolutely beautiful moment. But Picard comes around to this as well. I mean, it's a great little exchange. And again, we have Patrick Stewart making it seem effortless. He says, let's beam the shuttlecraft back aboard the ship, and Riker just kind of looks at him, and Picard says, "It's a perfectly good shuttlecraft." I'm not going to answer to you. Look, I'm not going to waste the equipment. Okay, I'm not. If Q happens to still be inside the shuttlecraft when we bring this perfectly good shuttlecraft back, then that's fine. What he's really doing is saving Q, obviously. Yeah. So I mean, he has his Baylock moment. He has his Baylock moment. It just takes, it takes a little longer to get to. But again, had Baylock been, torturing the 1701 for 3 seasons, it might have taken Kirk a little bit longer. Think about how they treated Harry Mudd. Now that you think about it, only bugged them twice,
right?
And they still left him to absolute torture on Mudd's planet, or Planet Mudd.
Yeah. Something that I really like in this episode is that the story is this kind of anthropology lesson on humanity. So we've said it over and over again that, well, people on Star Trek aren't really people, and that the aliens represent different parts of us. So they're the mirror by which we can examine ourselves. And we really do get kind of led by the hand here, and amusingly it's Data's hand, to explore all the little quirks and emotions that make being human. So we go through sleep and pain and depression, followed by the immense craving for chocolate, something that I can relate to, trying to find purpose, upsetting your friends and coworkers, compassion, sacrifice. After all that, it's almost kind of a letdown that Q can just get his powers back from the snap of fingers. Did he really learn anything? And we're led to believe that he probably didn't. Why would you even need to learn something if you have those godlike powers? And that kind of seems to be where we're left at the end. After all of that terrible stuff that Q goes through, yes, he does give Data that one nice little piece of the puzzle he's been missing, humor, and it's really pleasant to see that. But I also worry that Q is going to go back and torture I'm going to say it wrong, Calamarians. Yeah. Well, he would have. I mean, I did say in the recap, he did immediately go to torturing them until the other Q reminded him that he was actually still there and still watching. He was ready. Yeah. See, I don't know. Q has been a pain to this point, no question. I've always gotten the impression, though, that he's not a good guy necessarily, but I buy the change that happened to him in this episode. How lasting that change will be, I don't know. I think about the quarter second that it took for him to realize I have my powers back. All right, well, let me do a little jump the timeline thing then here. Okay. Would you want to see a 7 of 9 thing with Q? I mean, would you actually want him to become a member of the crew? Would you want to watch him, learn all of this stuff, or would you want to do sort of a more TOS thing where it's like, well, he used to be a god, he's not a god anymore, so we dropped him off at a star base, and hopefully he'll find his way through the galaxy. I mean, is this something that you would actually want to explore, or would you just like to know that it happened, or are you fine knowing that Q is going to be back? Because I love the Q episodes. I don't always find them particularly valuable, honestly, but they're a tremendous amount of fun. Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
so would you rather see something like he is assimilated into the crew of the Enterprise, or he becomes part of the crew of the Enterprise, or he tries to and fails, or something like that?
No, I think all those alternatives are terrible.
Okay, good.
But
All right.
but the thing is, like, you still want to see a character grow and change. So we saw that happen during the show, but then you sort of hit the reset button at the end, and it's like, well, he's just back to being Q, and the only reason he didn't absolutely crush the Calamarains was because other Q showed up just in the nick of time.
Do you think it was Q that saved Braille 4? Or do you think it was other Q that did that?
Yeah, well, see, it could have been that, too.
See, if other Q actually put the whole thing out of whack to test Q, then he may have gone ahead and reset it, just because those people don't deserve to die just because they were testing Q.
Right.
At the same time, other Q doesn't even seem to acknowledge that whole thing is happening, so we sort of assume that it's, the Delancey Q.
Right.
But we don't really know.
Well, that
because
kind of...
because if the Delancey Q did that, then that sort of disproves what you're saying. There's nothing in it for him to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if he goes ahead and does it, then no, it's not a selfless act. I mean, it's as simple as snapping his fingers, literally. But if he does that, then it shows that he was actually thinking of something besides his own entertainment. He was thinking of something besides his own, whims.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, see, this was kind of the question or the note that I had for the end of this episode. The idea that Q's, John Delancey's Q, his self-sacrifice, his compassion, is what inspired the other Q to give him his powers back. Mm-hmm. So then does that indicate that our Q, John Delancey Q, is a jerk even by Q standards?
Oh, I assume so. I mean, they said that his powers were stripped for spreading chaos through the universe.
Yeah.
Through the universe, not even through the galaxy.
The universe, just everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we do have Q then, who we have to assume are benevolent, who are kind, who are not insane.
Why?
Well, because those other Q don't do what our Q does.
Well, maybe not to the same extent. We don't actually know anything about the Q. This is the first time. I mean, John Delancey's our Q has talked about there being a Q continuum before, but we really didn't have any proof of that until this episode when a second Q shows up.
Right. Right, but even
this one seems just as insufferable as the first one.
Right, but the whole test is about his compassion and about a selfless act. So we have to assume that the selfless act is something that is very important to other Q. Yeah, which makes maybe this Q kind of an anomaly, and the other Q have to go around cleaning up after him.
This doesn't really get to any sort of higher moral, though. This is just sort of addressing a Q character thing, right?
It's a Q character thing. It's a Q character question, and then that kind of I mean, maybe it's a sort of not a failing of the episode, but it's an interesting choice of the episode. You know, I'm glad that, like you said, he's not a member of the crew, and we don't see something like that. But as far as a character arc, it's like, wow, we have this really powerful, interesting change for this character. And then we take it all away and just reset it back to where he was. And now he can go spread chaos throughout the universe, the entire universe, once again.
There's a song that I can't quote.
I find that hard to believe.
But that it reminds me of. Oh, no, I know the quote. I just can't say it on this show because I remember it. But it was one of the guys from Kids in the Hall. I think it was Bruce McCullough. It might have been his own album. And he did a song basically... singing as a guy who has just found out about Jesus 6 hours ago. But he hasn't really learned everything yet. And so by the end of the song, he's pretty much talking as someone who had never found Jesus, but now he's thrown Jesus into the mix. And the reason I bring that whole thing up is because you have this revelation, right? And it does not mean your entire life has changed. It becomes part of you at that point. You may learn more and you may become a better person about it, or you may have this revelation and think you know something and suddenly you don't. The fact that Q becomes Q again 6 hours later, just because, somebody handed his powers back to him, he was actually still Q all the way through. He was just having to deal with a new situation. Now, once he no longer has to deal with that situation in the same way, his immediate inclination is to go back to who he was initially. But it doesn't mean that he's going to stay that. I mean, because he now does have in his eons of existence, in his never not been a Q before, he actually has the very first thing that's been new for him in thousands and thousands of years, not being Q. Having all of the failings of humanity, and then finding out that all of humanity is not about failings necessarily. So I mean, the fact that you're right, it's a little bit disappointing that at the end of the episode he goes back to being exactly who he was. At the same time, it probably would have been a lot more disappointing if he had been like, but no, now I see the error of my ways, and so I'm going to go save other planets. I mean, we don't have to assume anything at this point. It seems possible, though, that he that this gets folded into the rest of his experience, and who knows, maybe changes stuff a little bit. Again,
it's going to go torture that gaseous cloud.
Well, no, he already tried that and it didn't work, so he just blew them away instead. Yeah. I actually wondered what happened to them when he went, and it was gone. It's like, I'm sorry, is that better? Is what just happened better? Do we know? Was he like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? He's small enough now. Was he actually swallowed by a dog somewhere? Right, and I guess that's good. I want to go back to something that I talked about in the recap.
Sure.
I'm actually going to recap part of the recap. Data and Q discuss whether Q is really human. Sadly, Q says it's true. An irony, says Data. It means you have achieved in disgrace what I have always aspired to be. Q says humans offer nothing to envy, though Data says he doesn't feel envy. He feels nothing. He shares the human race's curiosity, but he cannot share its emotions. Q says emotions aren't all they're cracked up to be. Is not feeling a desire to feel a feeling a feeling? I don't want to be all Armus on this, but I was reminded of the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, or the Scarecrow, or the Lion, or Dorothy before she actually got hit on the head and went up in the tornado and all that stuff. Right. They all had the thing that they were looking for. They just couldn't see that those things were the things that they were looking for. And I wondered if maybe that's Data's thing. And then of course, if Data's just an analog for us, since just like there's no Riker, there's if Data's just an analog for us, maybe that's an us thing too, or at least maybe that's an idea that someone is trying to impart. That, what does Dorothy say at the end of The Wizard of Oz? That if I'm looking for happiness, I don't need to go any further than my backyard, because if I can't find it there, I can't find it anywhere. Now, on the one hand, that sort of keeps people from. I mean, I hate that message in a lot of ways, because it really says no, don't aspire.
Yeah. Just stay at home. Stay
where you are is cool. Don't and if you think you need to go someplace else, well, have you checked your head? But
right.
It is kind of interesting to think that Data really is constantly looking for something that he has. He says he shares their curiosity. Well, then what else do you need at that point? I mean, it's almost like if he. I think we've actually talked about this before. I'm bothered by the fact that Data is written as, or was programmed by Sung, to constantly want this thing that he believes he can't have, and yet he wants it. That's almost like writing just like a little torturous subroutine into his operating system. Yeah, no,
it's kind of a cruel joke at a certain point. Yeah.
But so then I wondered if it's supposed to be a message of, look, he had this thing. He's had this thing the whole time. He just doesn't realize it. And is that, I don't think that actually is a message, but it's a message that I kind of pulled out of it, or it's an idea that I pulled out of it. He feels desire. He feels desire to feel. Okay, well, you're doing that right now. Is kind of what I was thinking. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was thinking about that too, about the cruel irony of what it is that he's given this programming to want these things. But then I also thought, well, what is his sort of what is the master program for Data? And the program is that he is to essentially assimilate himself into humanity, to work with humanity in order to learn about humanity. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, he's got to act like them. He's got to be like them. So he's taking on all the components of what humans do, whether it's, he even says that he eats, So he'll go to 10 forward and he's there with Q, and he said, well, I eat, but it's not for the same reasons that other people do, but it's sort of just like going through the motions to show, like, yeah, okay, this is what the context of that experience is like. Sitting in a place, talking to other people, not being on the clock. So I get it to that extent. That it's like you do the study by becoming part of the study. But I guess the emotional element is what we're grappling with here. The emotional idea that it's desire. It's not just do the study and then get out. It's desire to be a part of that. So that seems to be the difficult element there.
But then when you're talking about programming, and certainly this can be applied to people, Scientology proves it. You can tell yourself you're happy, and if you tell yourself in the right ways and enough time, you'll come to believe it. Whether you should actually be happy or not, is a very subjective thing. But I suppose the idea of happiness is a subjective thing as well. What I don't really get is programming it into Data. Why not just program him? Why not just program him to be satisfied?
Yeah.
I mean, he's and if we say again, Star Trek, go back to this side of paradise. The thing that upset people so much there was that people weren't actually striving. People weren't actually working. And so, you got to shut that down and get them out of there because there's radiation, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. So if you want to make that argument, the converse of that argument seems to be Data. Data is a thing. And he's wonderful and he's sad because he's constantly he's constantly striving. He's constantly working. But the problem is he's on a treadmill that he can never get off. At least as it stands right now. Now, we don't want to cross the timeline. So to this point, let's just say it strikes me as an absolutely torturous thing, and I'm not sure what the message of him is supposed to be. Just like, hey, look at him constantly working for the thing that he seriously cannot get.
Well, so
by definition, he can't have it.
Yeah, but there's something interesting about that idea, though. So Dr. Soong's medium is robotics.
Okay.
Dr. Soong's medium is artificial intelligence. Now, if Dr. Soong's medium had been poetry or writing a novel or being a filmmaker or something, he might come up with one volume, one tome that is about the human experience. Given the limits of what that thing is, given the limits of how long a book is or a poem or a movie or whatever. So Data is really the expression of that. Data is Dr. Soong saying, I'm going to explore humanity. I'm going to try to figure out what all of human experience is like. But my medium for exploring that will be this artificial intelligence, then, that I'm going to give a program to say, keep looking, keep talking to people, keep working with people, and gather every single piece of information that you can. The offshoot of that is that Data sort of synthesizes his own personality as well. But I'll cut him some slack for that. Dr. Soong didn't create a human. He created a obviously he created an android. I don't know. I'm struggling for the word. He created an android that has that as a purpose. So it's a little bit different from the colonists on Omicron Ceti 3. Just saying like, oh, okay, well, I'm done with the job, so I'm going to be done with the job, and Data being the opposite of that. I don't think those necessarily line up as direct opposites.
I guess the problem that I'm having is what Data wants is to feel, and his feeling a desire to feel is a feeling, and so I don't know if it feels to me then like there's something sort of sad about the fact that he may actually have the thing that he wants, but he can't recognize that he has the thing that he wants because he's too busy thinking that he can't have the thing he wants. And again, I don't think that's a great message. I really do believe that is the crux of The Wizard of Oz. Yeah. I believe that is the crux of the message at the end of the movie, The Wizard of Oz, anyway. Because, of course, at the end of the book, The Wizard of Oz, it turns out Oz is real, and there are like 29 more books. But at the end of the movie, The Wizard of Oz, it's like, oh, no. Be fine with your lot. Yeah. And it's strange to me that I don't know. It's just what happens with Data is just kind of odd to me.
Says it. Yeah,
go ahead.
I would say just very quickly, Data says it to Q. He says, well, look, humans have this insatiable desire to explore, to learn, to gain knowledge, and become something more. So that is that human element that he has, and he gets it. He gets that's part of the deal, But it's too bad he can't laugh about it too.
Yeah. We do want to talk about Guinan really quickly.
Yes.
I'm not sure she has a place on the Enterprise.
She's the bartender.
I know she's the bartender, but man, she's mean. She's mean. She is very much. I mean, everything that you were talking about how like Picard was, how they did not have the how they didn't have the Baylock moment. Mm-hmm. They did have the Baylock moment. It just took them a while to get to it. Yeah, no, Guinan. Apparently, it's her day off. She's not even in 10 forward when Q gets there, but she comes in on her day off to say, "So, I hear life sucks for you now. Let me just say, good. Also, let me give you pain. Oh, look, aliens are torturing you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me over the aliens torturing you? No? I'll wait. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Boy, does life suck for you, huh?"
Right.
I mean, that's pretty much it. And she's only there for the one season. I mean, she's only there for Act 3.
Yeah.
She's only there to give Q grief.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, not necessarily the best representation of how we want to be.
Well, you know what? So,
what I'm looking for in my bartender, by the way.
No.
Yeah,
but they have a history.
They do. They do have quite a history. Yes,
and apparently that history goes on for centuries.
Yes.
So, and she almost did some kung fu when she last encountered him.
Yeah, sort of some hexing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it was going to get dirty there for a moment, and we didn't have Picard there to say, "No, don't stab him with a fork." Maybe.
Do you need the captain of the starship there, though, to say, "Don't stab anybody with a fork"?
Well, we don't know their history. Again, there could have been just some terrible stuff with forks earlier in their history, but maybe what we're missing is that scene afterward where she has to go to, Captain Picard's ready room, and he says, now, Guinan, the next time we have a guest on board that you don't like, don't stab that person with a fork. You got to pass this time, but not next time.
Q gets to take his powers back. So, what is it that we can take from Deja Q?
Well, it seems like this happens over and over and over again. We reach the part of the show where we discuss the messages, morals, and meanings and find out whether it and the production, or they and the production, stand the test of time. It's like Deja Q all over again, John. As to be a little bit Yogi Berra.
Yeah.
Does this episode hold up as far as you're concerned?
Well, it's certainly fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fun part about this episode is just watching Q struggle, whether it's the light moments or the serious.
How very Guinan of you.
I know, right? See, she and I have a lot in common.
Yeah.
Hide the forks. A few and just a very few of the comedic moments play a little too broad. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of a minor complaint. Yeah, I feel like the writers know that you can hand John Delancey something and he will make it great. So when you have lines that are just kind of, they feel like add-ons, particularly in that first scene in the bridge, his appearance is just hilarious and great. And his exchange with Worf, as I said, is great. But you don't necessarily need him muttering as they get into the turbolift, "Oh, I'm claustrophobic." It's just adding on for the sake of adding on. Mm-hmm. So there are things like that kind of bothered me. Like you said before, Q episodes don't necessarily have to have a lot of meaning, but they can certainly be fun. So I'll give this one a pass for that. Yes, it does hold up, because if you are just looking for something fun, then sure, this is as fun as many other fun episodes. And if you like Q, then why not? How about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a Q episode. Mm-hmm. You almost can't go wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is a great character. It is neat to... How many godlike beings do we come across in the original series that we never saw again?
Just all of them.
The answer is all of them, right?
Yeah.
Any godlike beings we came across, we never saw again in the original series. I like the fact that he sort of becomes a foil for us. It's also, I will say, on the one hand, I missed things like all of the issues that were raised in The Hunted, or all of the issues that were raised in what was last week's episode?
The High Ground.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So all of the issues that were raised in both of those, I kind of missed those. At the same time, it was sort of like a nice breather for me personally, and yet it's not devoid of meaning. I mean, I think the whole question about, I don't know. I mean, the whole question about Data and seeking for something that he may already have, I personally found kind of interesting. Do I think it was an intentional message? No, but it's an interesting thing to play with that I sort of drew from this episode. Certainly, not going around the universe being a jerk
Right.
might not be a bad message as well. And applied more broadly, if you've got power, if you've got prestige, if you've got privilege, and hey, that could just make you even lower middle class. But, if you pass a guy who's sitting on the corner begging for change, you don't have any change to give him, fine, don't give him change. You don't have to be mean to him. I mean, don't be a jerk is actually, is, I guess, kind of a theme through all of the Q episodes, but especially this one because, should things turn, I don't know, there may be no such thing as karma, but you might find yourself in bad situations wishing that you hadn't been quite so mean to somebody else going forward. I mean, there are broadly applicable messages, it seems to me, but not like a, you see Timmy sort of message. What about you?
Well, I kind of wish that Q hadn't just come right out and said the boy who cried wolf, because he kind of just...
Well, he did say the boy who cried wharf. See, it's funny because it's a play on it's a play on things.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. I wish he hadn't just come right out and said it, because that kind of is the message here of the story. But other than that, and not burning bridges or, creating enemies, because in some kind of karmic way it can maybe come back to bite you. But overall, this is kind of classic Star Trek in the sense that it's a study on what makes a human a human. What are the qualities that make us unique? Or even if they aren't totally unique, then what are the qualities we like to encourage and celebrate? And we see cooperation, compassion, empathy, except in Guinan. So this just happens to be sort of a light way to explore that. You do it through a fun character instead of doing it through, the immediate threat of danger and death and seriously high drama like we've seen when Star Trek has explored those themes in the past. So as far as a message, it's not a you see Timmy moment, but as part of the another thread in the fabric of Star Trek looking at humanity, it fits right in with that. So are those messages that hold up? Well, sure. They're very broad, very vague, general messages. Yeah.
I mean, it's you mentioned, they're doing it in sort of a light episode. Mm-hmm. The episode is so light that it's easy to miss the messages, I think.
Oh, sure.
But, if you miss the messages, you actually still get a fairly enjoyable episode of Star Trek. I mean, there is some drama as far as like, we want to save these people, but we're going to be attacked by this thing if we do. And, how do we get out of that? And it's not high drama, like you say.
Yeah.
It's worth it, though, just for John Delancey's, just for his actual, when he gets to the part where he's examining who he's been at that point. Yeah, it's, sure, the messages hold up. They're easy to miss, and if you miss the messages, still don't miss the episode, because it's decent. I'd say it lasts.
It's sort of like one of those oft-told, like, guardian angel stories. It's like when you do the thing, when you have the moment of realization that you have to have empathy for others, you can act for others, not just for yourself, then that's sort of when you earn your wings, right?
Note to self, Highway to Heaven reboot starring John Delancey.
All right, with that, Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer Rod Roddenberry. You can find out more, so much more, at roddenberry.com, so please check it out, roddenberry.com. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM, that's trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
Next week, a matter of perspective.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages, by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Fashions for the Q Continuum provided by House of Beige. When you care enough to not be naked, but not much more than that. Remember, House of Beige. And transmission.